It's WCCS 101.1 FM and AM 1160. I'm going to move this out of the way because you're sitting in that chair and I can't see you over there. There he is.
There I am. Here I am.
Ralph May is with us this morning, Dr. Ralph May. Our conversation is brought to you by Marcus & Mack, voted best personal injury law firm in the Best of Indiana County contest. Marcus & Mack, a law firm representing injured people. Good morning. It's good to have you with us. I'm asking you here for a very important topic, I think, anyway. The subject of mass shootings, and particularly lately the one in Tennessee, which seems to have touched an even rawer nerve for America, the school shooting there. Probably because we have such clear video of it and it came out right away. And the feeling of those of us who we're far removed, hundreds of miles away from that, and yet the whole country has felt the impact of that particular shooting. And it really is a very raw emotion that is being felt in this country right now because of it.
Absolutely. I mean, I think because we are in this age where we can have basically live streaming of events and you can actually see events and then recordings of events, it makes it so concrete and real to people, and the trauma of the event spreads out like a shockwave and affects people no matter how far physically away you are from it. There's still a psychological effect that this is real. This could happen. This could happen anywhere. It could happen at any time. And that creates, of course, a level of anxiety, a level of worry, a level of fear that goes up in everyone. And then, of course, it's, in covering the news, have a responsibility to report, but it gets amplified immeasurably as it's recycled and replayed. And like 9/11 and watching the airplanes hit the Twin Towers, it's just recycled and recycled. So after a while, it becomes much bigger and much bigger and much bigger and much more of an event that induces fear. And that's what we have to look at now in these events, is that we have to know about them, we have to understand them, we have to see them. But we have to make sure that we limit our exposure to how much we keep observing and watching, and we traumatize ourselves by over-absorbing ourselves in it. What we need to do is learn from these events. We need to take these events and create a constructive dialogue and a constructive approach to solving these events, to solving active shooter and mass shootings. And active shooter and mass shootings are two different things. Active shooter are specifically targeting schools or businesses or churches, where mass shootings may be individuals in arguments or agitated with one another that go to a party, and we've seen a number of those lately where there would be gunfire at parties or gunfire at celebrations. Those are different kinds of things. So when you look at everything, the number of these events is going up. This year we've had 164 this year so far. Wow. Now that's not active shooter, but that's mass shootings. Mm-hmm. And that's more than we've ever had before. The number of actual active shooter events where the individual targets a school or targets a church, it went down in 2022, down to 50, which is still a lot, but not quite as high this year so far. So we have to think about these kinds of events differently. There are different reasons that people do this. The active shooter event is a specific planned event against a school or against a church that the person considers and thinks about for some time. So there's an opportunity. I think the news here is there's an opportunity to prevent these events by vigilance, by paying attention to people who may be in trouble or may be communicating that they're in trouble, and by intervening earlier. These individuals, I want to make clear too, because you know me, I've been talking about mental illness for years on this show and in my career. Mm-hmm. Most of these active shooting events are not caused by individuals with known mental illness. I think that's important to note. They have psychological problems, but not diagnosed as having a mental illness. And that's important because these individuals need intervention, but are not getting it, are not being recognized as needing it. So we need to continue to pay attention. I think one of the most important things, Todd, is when we see these events, these uncontrollable, horrific events, which we are just terrible to observe and horrible to think about. We have to learn, okay, what do we know about this event, and we can learn from it so we can do something in terms of prevention, active prevention. I know I'm a big proponent of training schools in active shooter. There's a debate, should you raise the anxiety level in children by doing these trainings? Yeah. I consider them to be like fire drills. You prepare active shooter scenarios are something you do not think is going to happen to you. And God willing, and statistically, it probably never will. Mm-hmm. But You have to prepare for the worst and hope for the best. Like our first responders say, prepare for the worst, hope for the best.
Yeah. My son's school, the school at which he teaches, they've been told that in the next 2 weeks they're going to have an active shooter, their annual active shooter training for the entire school population. I want to talk about the anxiety levels that you mentioned a couple of moments ago. For first of all, from the student perspective, and then from the teacher and administrative perspective. First of all, from the students, these are kids that they're thinking, okay, I'm going to school. I go to school every day.
Right.
Why should a kid like that have to worry about something like that? Why should their anxiety level be raised up and their alert level have to be raised up? And how do they deal with that anxiety?
And I think that we have to look at the age first. There's research that shows that elementary level students process this fear differently than secondary level students, obviously. So we have to be guided by what the kids say. What are their concerns? What are their fears? Kids will respond to adults. How the adults handle the anxiety about these situations, the kids will reflect off of that or resound with that or interact with that anxiety. If the adults say, yes, this can be a threat, this is something we have to prepare for, but it is low likelihood, we have a plan, here's what you can do, here's what we can do, that helps greatly reduce anxiety. You have to, you can't pretend like this won't ever happen. You can't use denial as a protection because that's ineffective. Mm-hmm. What you have to do is use the anxiety in a positive effort to plan. There's going to be some anxiety. Now, I want to point out there have been some really negative active shooter trainings where they don't prepare the students in advance. They just try to run the drill without any warning. That's traumatic. That's unnecessary.
Yeah.
The research shows you prepare the students first by educating, explaining, going through the process of going through the whys behind it and what we're going to do so the kids are ready, and then you run the drill. Mm-hmm. Most of the kids will respond well to the training because you're doing something constructive. You're preparing something constructive. You may never need it, but you're preparing something constructive. It's something that you can do. And then you listen for the dialogue. Adolescents typically get more agitated and angry about having to do it.
Yeah.
Why do we have to do this? It's unfair. Well, it is unfair, and we shouldn't have to do it. I completely agree with that. But the alternative is do nothing and pretend like it won't happen. That's not a very good strategy because we know, by the way, that the schools that have done active shooter training, when there has been an active shooter event, their lockdowns are far more effective. If you noticed in the Tennessee events, the kids were locked down. They were secured away.
Yeah.
I suspect that a lot of lives were saved because they were ready. They locked down. They protected the children, and it gave law enforcement time enough to get there and neutralize the shooter because they had a preparatory plan and they executed it effectively. So active shooter is an effective way of doing something meaningful. It does raise your anxiety. It's going to raise your anxiety, but it's a constructive way of dealing with the anxiety.
IUP does a wonderful job when they have their active shooter training, not only informing the student body and everybody on campus, but the entire community. This is going to be happening.
That's right.
From the teacher or other school personnel standpoint, the anxiety that they feel in going to school every day, feeling the responsibility that they have to step in and do whatever is mandated of them from their employment situation and their care for the kids.
How many times have I heard them say, I'm a teacher, I'm not law enforcement. I wasn't trained to be in combat. I was trained to teach kids. And so there's this frustration and anxiety that comes from it's tough enough in this day and age to provide a solid education to kids and work with kids with all the issues that they're facing. But this is unfortunately part of the world we live in. So my best advice to the teachers are prepare for this. Make it part of your mental agenda of keeping the kids safe, educating the kids. It's just part of the plan that you have to do. I think that's important. I also think it's important that we do have a law enforcement presence in the schools. I think we need to have that now. We need to have safety and security officers who are armed so that some of the burden of the physical safety, there's a plan internally to deal with it until external law enforcement can respond. So that's an important part too. Now, the final piece of this, which is a bigger administrative piece, is who pays for security? Who pays for the things necessary? And there's a debate, and it's through the Department of Education, the Department of Homeland Security. This is not cheap to do these preparations and to prepare schools and to harden targets. So there's this other administrative nightmare of how do we figure out how to pay for all this to keep the kids safe.
Mm-hmm. But the bottom line is you have to do everything you possibly can.
You have to keep the kids safe. You have to keep yourself safe. And this is unfortunately the way things are right now. Mm-hmm. And pretending that it's not this way, when I used to do active shooter trainings with some of the other law enforcement personnel, I would say, the river in Egypt is a bad plan. People would look at, what do you mean river in Egypt? Denial.
Yeah.
Denial is never a good plan for dealing with these kind of things.
Yeah. And there are issues of mental health and emotions that professionals, teachers, right, and others are going to feel, and they should know that there are professionals that can help, right, you deal with all of those emotions, the fears, whatever they might be.
Right. I mean, professional support is necessary, and so you have in Indiana. We're lucky; we have professional support all over the place. We've got the Open Door Crisis Line, which is 24/7. You could just talk to somebody. The Indiana County Critical Incident Stress Team, which I'm clinical director of, we respond to schools. We do preparation. We will go in and talk about preparatory stress. What do we do? How do we plan? What do we do? How do we handle the anxiety that comes with this? So there are external resources that the schools do use, which I think can be very effective in helping. And I want to point out, Safe to Say in the schools has been very helpful, not only at preventing suicide, but identifying kids that might be at risk for violence. Mm-hmm. And so getting those kids the help they need. This is not about getting kids out of school or locking them up. This is about getting kids the help they need so that we can reduce the chance that violent events become part of the process.
Yeah, Safe to Say has been a real godsend.
Been a real godsend.
All right. He is Dr. Ralph May. Thanks so much for coming in to share with us. We appreciate it.
Thanks for having me, Todd.
It is the voice of Indiana County, WCCS.